Welcome to Passionate Reply, and welcome to Great Albums. Today, I'll be talking about one of those albums that isn't necessarily the most acclaimed or best remembered work of its period, but nonetheless played an important role in history, and remains unrivaled for its uniqueness. Pete Shelley's HOMOSAPIEN, first released in 1981. Shelley has historically been chiefly remembered as the frontman of the punk act Buzzcocks. But despite punk's reputation for simplicity to the point of obnoxiousness, Shelley was one of many musicians to come from the punk scene with a penchant for experimental or otherwise groundbreaking music. His very first solo release, 1980's Sky Yen, features little more than a brash wall of oscillating electronic noise, not unlike the earliest provocations of industrial artists like Cabaret Voltaire. Subsequent generations of critics have gone great lengths to coin and define terminology in the hopes of breaking this period down into constituent parts, but the more I study it, the more I'm inclined to view it as just a huge soup. There was, quite simply, a lot going on in Britain's underground in the late 70s and early 80s, and in practice the lines between punk, post-punk, industrial, synth, noise, and other avant-garde miscellany are frequently illegible. As an artifact of this era, HOMOSAPIEN resonates with all of the contradictions this melting pot would imply, fusing emotional rawness and pristine production in a way that never quite settles down and feels comfortable.
I don't know what it is, but it makes my heart beat faster. I don't know what it is, but it has become my
I Don't Know What It Is served as the opening track of the album's second side, as well as its lead single. With a bona fide guitar solo as well as a propulsive and truly soaring chorus, it somewhat resembles that most 1980s of art forms, the power ballad. It is ostensibly a love song and is revealed to be one quickly enough, but its portrayal of love is far from kind. While the real power ballad might take the concept of love for granted, I Don't Know What It Is seems to portray it as something mysterious, inscrutable, and dangerous. And I can't forget to mention just how much Pete Shelley stands out as a vocalist. His high-pitched, perhaps even fried or shrill vocals add a great deal to this song's sense of unease, and really sell the idea of someone who's being overtaken by an uncontrollable and dominating force. Of course, perhaps the most noteworthy thing about HOMOSAPIEN's sound is its fusion of the hard, driving acoustic guitar of punk with the electronic sensibilities of its producer Martin Rushent. I wouldn't say this combination is ever terribly cohesive in its sound, but I think that's why I find this album so interesting. There's a tension that permeates each track, a feeling that things don't fit together. While HOMOSAPIEN is a pioneering work of electronic-centered production, enough of the pieces are still in place that you can certainly hear the shape of music to come as you listen to it. It's not just the synthesizers, but also the use of electronic percussion here. It's difficult to overstate the impact that so-called drum machines had around this time. While reviled by many, both then and now, rhythm machines were undeniably instrumental in changing what popular music sounded like. Even synthesizer-based electronic acts like Gary Newman, OMD, and Kraftwerk often relied on traditional percussion, so this was genuinely pretty shocking at the time. Perhaps the most important element of the legacy of HOMOSAPIEN is the fact that Martin Rushent would go on to use the skills he honed here to produce one of the most influential albums of the 1980s, and perhaps of all time. The Human League's Dare, which would go on to cast an enormous shadow on nearly all popular music to come, after playing an enormous role in instigating an era of popular dominance of synth pop. In that sense at least, HOMOSAPIEN is certainly a very historically important album, and for that reason alone I think it deserves a fair bit more attention than it gets. Still, for as much as the electronics might be the most forward-looking element of this album, one also can't deny that it remains full of aggressive and perfectly punk overtones, as on the crass or perhaps dismissive screed of "Guess I must have been in love with myself." HOMOSAPIEN has many moments of seemingly being too thorny to get a good grip on, that doesn't mean that there aren't also times in which it can feel a bit like more than the sum of its apparent parts, as on its most narrative-driven track, Pusher Man. Pusher Man is one of, if not the, most synth-centered compositions to be had on HOMOSAPIEN, but its insistent pacing and neurotic portrayal of the low-life theme of buying illicit drugs mean you'll never confuse it for run-of-the-mill synth-pop. More so than anything else the album offers, this track reminds me of the sort of synth-punk that American acts like The Units and Crash Course in Science would put forward at around the same time. Pusher Man was, at the very least, a sufficiently experimental track to earn the honor of being cut from the US release of the album in order to make room for some non-album A-sides, as happened to many albums at the time. But hey, that's enough beating around the bush, let's talk about the real crown jewel of this album.
I'm the shy boy, you're the coy boy, and you know what HOMOSAPIEN too. I'm the cruiser, you're the loser, me and you say HOMOSAPIEN too. Homo superior,
you've heard anything from this album before, chances are it was probably the title track, which proved to be quite the commercial success, despite being banned by the BBC on account of its homoerotic content. Given that this very same year, they also came after OMD's Enola Gay for its obviously non-existent reference to homosexuality, one might be forgiven for thinking that a tune called HOMOSAPIEN was simply misinterpreted. The title track isn't terribly explicit material, but its clever wordplay nonetheless deals quite deftly with issues of sexuality and personal identity. In the earlier verses, Shelley introduces us to typified roles of gay male sexuality, the cruiser, the shy boy, only to seemingly doff them with the tune's defiant refrain, asserting that the only truly important identity a human being has is that of Homo sapien. Far from being an unfortunate coincidence, the similarity of Homo sapien to homosexual is being employed here completely deliberately, particularly with it being mashed into a single word and thus gaining a greater resemblance to the word homosexual in print. It not only allows Shelley to belt out a borderline dirty word, but also creates a sort of unconscious syllogism, suggesting in a sense that, well, homosexuals are people too. With elements of both unapologetic pride in one's own queerness, as well as the uncompromising assertion that humanity is something much deeper than that, the title track of HOMOSAPIEN is one of the most fascinating and inspiring queer anthems of its time. Its artsy slipperiness has prevented it from feeling more shallow with time, and its straightforward or raw quality, intensified by that constant acoustic guitar, has kept it sounding equally sharp. It genuinely does surprise me that this album isn't at least a little bit better remembered than it is. Outside of the title track, most of this album is currently not available on services like Spotify and YouTube Music at the time of this writing, and I actually struggle to present musical examples to you here. That's really a pretty high level of neglect in this day and age, and I hope it can be rectified in the relatively near future. It would be no exaggeration for me to say that HOMOSAPIEN features some of my very favorite cover art of any album ever. HOMOSAPIEN's sleeve design sees Shelley occupy some sort of sleek but hollow hyper-modernist office. Geometric forms suggest the world of the artificial or ideal. An Egyptian statue beside Shelley is a reminder of history, and the idea that even the greatest empires must eventually fall. Likewise, the telescope and early computer positioned nearer to Shelley are evocative symbols of science and technology, but in context they seem more sinister, being juxtaposed against a phrenology bust, which evokes the ways in which our attempts at science have caused misunderstanding and great human misery in the past. The central scene is framed in with large areas of black, which make the space feel even more claustrophobic and uninviting, and Shelley appears to be pushed into the background, almost belittled by the inanimate objects. Overall, I think it's sort of funny that this album's cover is perhaps more iconically new wave than the music itself ended up being, particularly with Shelley clad in this somewhat foppish white suit and bow tie, certainly a big change of attire for a former punk. Given the experimental nature of the collaboration between Shelley and Rushent, you might be surprised to learn that HOMOSAPIEN actually wasn't a one-off. Just 2 years later, Shelley would release a follow-up LP, XL1, which was also produced by Rushent and largely continues some of the same ideas. While Shelley would never see the success of HOMOSAPIEN again, the XL1 single Telephone Operator would also chart to a lesser degree. My favorite track on HOMOSAPIEN is Qu'est-ce que c'est que ça, which closes out the first side of the album. If you're familiar with my other work, you probably already know that I'm coming at this as someone chiefly interested in the electronic side of things, and I think that of everything on this album, Qu'est-ce que c'est que ça is the closest to being convincing as a synth-pop tune. With a bubbly, synth-dominant sound and lyrics that are more contemplative than aggressive, it's just much closer to the mold of what I usually listen to for fun than a lot of the other tracks are. That's everything for today. Thanks for listening.